Hey everybody, we're back for chapter 2 of book Scavengger. Chapter 1 was a whirlwind of emotions. Mr. Griswold, somebody was trying to steal Mr. Griswold's very precious book. There was only one copy of it or something, and he got shot, and when we left off he was getting help, which was good, but he was hoping the book had been thrown and he wasn't able to get it, so he was just hoping that somebody that would find it would know what to do with it, and do right by it, whatever that means. Guess we'll find out. All right, here we go, chapter 2. The clue was a substitution cipher, Emily was sure. Figuring that out had been the easy part. The hard part was trying to crack it. She rearranged the letters in another attempt to solve it. Thoreau Furzy Borg the Zooey. That couldn't be right. Who was Furzu Borg, and why would she have to throw him a Zoe, or a Zooey? And what was a Zooey anyway? There was no way to advance to the August Dupin level of book Scavengger. With a huff, Emily ripped the page from her notebook, crumpled it, and dropped it with the other failed attempts littering the cab of the moving van. At the top of a fresh page, she carefully recopied the cipher she'd printed from the book Scavengger website a few days ago. Hey, Shirley Locks, Dad interrupted her. Take a break and enjoy the scenery. You know who once lived in San Francisco, don't you? Gee, let me guess, Emily continued, writing in her notebook without looking up. Her dad had only mentioned they were moving to the home of his literary idol, 60 million times. There was nowhere to go but everywhere. Jack Kerouac wrote that in On the Road, Dad, I know. Emily sighed, frustrated with the cipher and frustrated with her dad for breaking her concentration. She slid her pencil back through her ponytail for safekeeping. They weren't driving through a valley jam-packed with rows of houses wrapped around hillsides like serpentine belts. Emily guessed there was more houses in this one corner of California than in the entire state of New Mexico, where they had most recently moved from. In the side view mirror, she could see the family's beat-up minivan trailing behind them. They had nicknamed the minivan Sal, another homage to the great and almighty Jack Kerouac. I don't know how to say his last name, I'm so sorry. Their mother gripped Sal's steering wheel and leaned forward the way she always did, like she was so excited to get where they were going, whether it was the grocery store or California. Matthew, Emily's older brother, bobbed his lopsided mohawk as he listened to music. Most likely Flush, his favorite band. Emily would bet a box of books on it. Nothing more exciting than a new beginning, don't you think? Emily's dad asked. Emily nodded, although she wasn't sure she agreed. Her parents were so proud of this life they'd created, but she didn't get their enthusiasm for new beginnings. It was like starting a bunch of books and never finishing any of them. California would be the 9th state for Emily in her 12 3/4 years, all part of her parents' quest to live once in each of the 50 states. Yes, a quest to live in every state. That always went over well when Emily tried to explain their frequent moving to people. Are you in the military? Are you in a witness protection program? Are you on the run from the feds? You just move around for fun? Starting before she was born, her parents had bounced from state to state because, in their words, that's where our paychecks pulled us. When Emily was 5, they lived in New York and her dad was laid off from his job at a publishing company. He started to take on freelance copy editing jobs. That same year, her mother was given permission to do her programming job remotely, which meant anywhere she had a computer. Realizing, it's funny, they defined the word remotely, but I think we can figure that out, can't we? Realizing their work wouldn't be tying them to one spot, her parents decided to make their fantasy of living once in every state a reality. They started a blog called 50 Homes in 50 States and chronicled their moving adventures. The blog had been a hobby to begin with, a way to capture memories from the different places they lived, but it grew to a side of business with companies paying to advertise on it, and travel sites and magazines asking them to write articles. The Crane family had been averaging a move almost once a year ever since. For a while, Emily loved it. It was a big family adventure, discovering new places, the suspense of where they would go next, and her parents always tried to make it fun. Like their reveal tradition, a surprise dinner they threw for Emily and her older brother, with clues indicating their next destination. 3 weeks ago, Emily had walked into their rental after school, brainstorming ideas for a noble New Mexico landmark to feature in her diorama project, and found the kitchen table set with sourdough bread bowls filled with gold foil-wrapped chocolate coins. Her whole body had tensed up, knowing she walked into a reveal dinner, which meant they were moving again. You'd think she would have gotten used to these surprises, but she hadn't. At first, all she could think about was how she wouldn't get to make her own rock crystal I should know this word, but I don't. Her own rock crystal stalactites. I don't know. Sorry, guys. For her Carlsbad Caverns diorama idea. Then she saw more clues for their next destination. An Alcatraz outpatient mental ward t-shirt for Matthew, a paperback copy of the Maltese Falcon for Emily, and a black and orange Giants cap her mom wore. Her dad dressed like a beatnik in a black turtleneck, beret, and black framed glasses. Sentences are so long. Whew. When she deduced San Francisco was their next move, Emily should have flung the gold coins in celebration. The city was not only home to her dad's literary idol, but Emily's too. Garrison Griswold, CEO of Bayside Press and mastermind of Book Scavengger, the coolest book hunting game in existence. Also the only book hunting game in existence. Book Scavengger was an online community of people who loved books and puzzles and games as much as Emily did, and it traveled with her no matter where her family lived. But instead of celebrating, she found herself forcing a smile for her parents. Now that the Cranes had spent years bouncing from state to state, their family adventures were starting to feel... Emily wasn't sure what the word was to describe it. All she knew was, a few weeks ago, she'd been sitting with a book and her bagged lunch at her usual spot on the stone planter that surrounded the old oak tree at her Albuquerque middle school. A group of girls she barely knew sprawled near her on the grass. She listened to them complain about how boring their upcoming weekend would be because they were going to the community pool again. And then they started talking about a dance class they took together. The girls jumped up and tried to remember a routine they had performed years earlier, doing the moves right there on the grass. Emily, pretending to read her book and not pay them any attention, had felt wistful and a tiny bit jealous. Not because she wanted to take dance classes or be a part of their group or go to the community pool so regularly it became boring. What bothered her, she realized as she covertly watched those girls, was that she would never have that circle of friendship. Thanks to her family's traveling lifestyle, she would always be the outsider. She could take dance classes and go to the community pool, sure, but she never stuck around long enough to make real friends, much less relive memories with them years later. As the moving van exited the freeway and rattled past the baseball stadium, Emily tried to focus on the positive. Book Scavengger, San Francisco. Sunshine glinted off a silver bridge that arched overhead. Not the Golden Gate Bridge. Emily knew that bridge was red and not silver. Flat water and docks were on one side of their van and a cluster of skyscrapers on the other. In a way, it reminded her of Lake Michigan when they lived in Chicago, with a city view in one direction and a tranquil spread of water on the other. Although the San Francisco Bay was a swimming pool in comparison to Lake Michigan, with mounds of land on the far side that looked close enough to swim to. They turned away from the water and headed down a busy street. They were soon engulfed by office buildings so tall Emily couldn't see the tops from where she sat. She double-checked the radio station they were listening to, 104.5, making sure it matched the numbers she'd written in her notebook. According to the information she'd read in the Book Scavengger forums, the station would be broadcasting Mr. Griswold's new game announcement any minute now. In addition to running a publishing company, Garrison Griswold organized outlandish events such as annual Quidditch tournament in Golden Gate Park and literary bingo game with so many participants it filled a baseball stadium and earned him a spot in the Guinness World Records book. It was why people called him the Willy Wonka of book publishing. People traveled to San Francisco to participate in his games, and now Emily was going to be living there herself, at least for a while anyway. She would have been there in person to hear the announcement, but by the time she knew they were moving to San Francisco, tickets had all been given away. Traffic, her dad sighed. They had slowed to a stop and idled in a line of cars. Her mother and brother were one car behind in Sal the minivan. A green trolley rattled down tracks in the middle of the street. They inched forward. The flashing lights of a police car came into view, then a fire truck, then an ambulance. Yellow caution tape was strung in a wide perimeter around the stairs descending underground. An officer directed them around the emergency vehicles. Emily craned her neck for a better view. "Is that the subway station?" she asked. "They call it BART here," her dad said. "I wonder what's going on." Emily searched for a clue to what happened, but there was nothing to see besides the flashing lights and emergency vehicles. She bowed her head, ponytail curled around her neck, and resumed her code-breaking work. Whew. All right, so now we got to know another main character, Emily. That's really exciting. She's moving to San Francisco. I hope she gets to see what she wants to see there. Poor Emily. All right, I hope you guys have a great day. I'll talk to you later. Bye.